What is going on, everyone? My name's Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video, and today it's the Game Week 9 preview. Yes, we're very close to the deadline now. The international break is almost over for a little while at least. Going to go through some of your questions and topics that you've brought to me. So Salah versus Mane, hopefully this will be the last time for a while. Pookie, whether to get rid of him or not, looking at the captaincy and some other bits as well. Just before we jump into that, just to say this video is sponsored by OneFootball. It's a really great app for FPL managers. You can set it to show any football team you want. So obviously if you want to just see Premier League, you can. Or if you just want to set it to the teams that you've got players involved in, you can do that as well. And it will show you things like team news and then fast live scores, goals, assists, all the good stuff that we want to see. And hopefully it will show you all the points that you've brought in over the weekend, although obviously it will also show you a lack of points as well if you've done badly. So if you want to download that, link is in the description. Otherwise, let's jump into this video. So let's talk about Salah versus Mane. Probably again, I haven't gone back and checked how often we've talked about it on these preview series, but I wouldn't expect this to be the first one. But it did come up again when I put out the tweet and the YouTube message today asking for topics and questions. So I wanted to go through it because it did come up, and obviously if people are on wildcard and they're only looking at getting one, then let's talk about which one. I think this will be the last time we probably do this for a little while unless something major changes. So looking at the prices, only a 0.8 million difference. They're very similarly priced. Salah is still the 12.5 million that he started at, and Mane is 11.7 million. So he's gone up 0.2 million since the start of the season. And obviously he's been doing very well, and he is ahead of Salah on points. I did put out a tweet kind of a few weeks ago saying just pick one and stick with it, and I still kind of feel that to be true. You shouldn't be wasting transfers constantly going back and forth on those two. But 0.8 million is not too much of a price difference. But obviously, with prices, they're not necessarily high this year, but a lot of the players we want have been priced well, and it is tough to fit them all in. So 0.8 million can be quite a bit of a difference in your team, especially if you're wildcarding this week. And I've actually looked at making the swap from Salah to Mane at some point to get money. So definitely worth considering that 0.8 million. If you've got really high team value and money to burn, then maybe it doesn't matter. But for a lot of you, it could do. Looking at the stats. So first of all, looking at the season stats. So Salah's played 99 minutes more. Obviously, Mane did miss out at the start of the season. Chances created. Salah's created 15 versus 13 for Mane. Shots, he's slightly ahead as well. 26 versus 19. In the box, you'd expect that to be up as well. 21 versus 16. But on target, only 11 versus 10. So Mane's nearly had as many shots on target over the course of the season as Salah. So you could see that as being a bit more clinical. And Salah's expected goals and expected assists, as expected, no pun intended, are slightly higher as well. But if you look over the last 4 weeks, obviously Mane's now played almost as many minutes as Salah in the last 4. In fact, it's only an 18-minute difference in favour of Salah. Chances created, Salah's still a bit more creative, so 7 chances created versus 3. But shots are very similar, 13 shots versus 12. In the box, it's 11 versus 10. And on target, actually, Mane is slightly higher now, 6 versus 5. So most of the stats are still in Salah's favour, but not by a huge amount. I think a lot of people on podcasts have pointed out, I was listening to Planet FPL and Who Got the Assist. They were kind of saying that Mane had outscored Salah or kept up with him for like the last 25 or 27 game weeks, something like that. And it's believable when there's only been 8 game weeks this season and how well he did last year, and obviously was the golden boot along with Aubameyang and Salah. So he's doing really well. He is cheaper. I don't really see a huge reason to keep Salah, especially if you're on a wild card. Obviously, he is on penalties when Milner's not on the pitch, but when Milner is on the pitch, he doesn't get them. That's what it seems to be like still. So that's not necessarily a huge advantage. Obviously, it depends how many minutes Milner's going to play. And then when you look at the eye test, I don't think you can really say that one is better than the other. A few people pointed out that when Origi plays, Mane quite goes central usually, or a lot of the time, so that obviously helps him out as well. I think one of the things, again, this was discussed on the Planet FPL and Who Got the Assist podcast, is fear. And not having a Salah has been quite fearful for a lot of us FPL managers for a long time. I feel like even though I still own Salah, I've kind of got past that. If I need to make the move, I'm going to make it. But it's just one of those things that when you've got Mane or Salah, it's probably not worth using a transfer on switching. If you need the money, however, Salah to Mane seems like a good move, especially if it's for free. I'm not sure about doing it for a hit. I don't think you'd make that back that quickly. But long term, I just think Mane for the cheaper price is probably the one to go for now. But let me know in the comments below, will you be using a transfer to make the move? Who would you go for on wildcard, etc. Obviously, when you blank 4 times in 5 game weeks, you're going to start talking about getting rid of certain players. And there's a lot of love lost, I think, for Pookie. And there's a lot of people considering maybe keeping him, maybe not. So let's talk about it a bit. Obviously, look at the form. 37 points in the first 4 games, which was brilliant, but only 17 in the last 4. So 4 points per game is not awful. Obviously, we picked him up at 6.5 million. Maybe you're more likely to hold on to him. But he is 7.1 million now, so he is similar price to Jimenez. More expensive than more pay, and not too much off the likes of Abraham and Wilson, who you might be considering bringing in. And obviously 4 blanks in the last 5, not great. 3 away games, but the one that I think stood out for me was the Aston Villa game. Just not getting anything from that was a bit of a no-no for me in terms of keeping him. But let's talk about whether we should get rid of him or not. So upcoming fixtures, are they that good? Bournemouth away, Man United at home, Brighton away and Watford at home. So I feel like the Bournemouth and Watford games, either side of that block of 4, are pretty good. Man United at home, I'm not so sure about. I know a lot of people are down on Man United right now. They've not been performing, not getting the results, but they're not conceding a huge amount of goals. Defensive stats are pretty good as well. Obviously, De Gea is injured, so maybe that will help. But Romero is not a bad number 2. So I'm not sure that's a great fixture. And Brighton away, they're not conceding too many shots either. So the Bournemouth away game is good. I think they've conceded the second highest shots in the box at home all season, and they're the worst for expected goals conceded across the whole season as well. So Bournemouth are giving up quite a few chances. I think the Brighton game, like I said, is much more difficult, and Watford's probably a little bit easier as well. So 2 good fixtures, 2 not so good. I think the key for me there is because the Bournemouth game is next. If you're unsure, you could leave him just for one more game. And I know we sometimes get stuck saying that. We'll just leave him for one more game, and the next week it's just one more game. You could just leave him for the Bournemouth game and hope that those chances conceded keep up and he managed to get his shooting boots on. So if you've got the money maybe to upgrade to an Abraham if you don't own him, or a Wilson, then perhaps you just do that. If it's for a hit, I'm not so sure whether he's worth taking out for a hit. And it's actually a consideration I've got myself. I just don't think I can bring myself to do it when I look at those Bournemouth stats. When you look at his own personal stats, from basically I looked at the first 4 fixtures to the last 4 fixtures that he's played, so obviously we've had 8 altogether. His expected goals gone up ever so slightly. He was only on 1.55 expected goals for the first 4. So scoring 5 goals probably a little bit lucky. And obviously that's come down a bit now in the last 4 where he's got 1.77 expected goals. So over the course of the season, it's less than 3, but he scored like 6 goals. So maybe it's a bit of regression going on, although obviously it is a small sample size. Less goal attempts, 14 in the first 4 versus 10 now. Less shots in the box, 13 versus 8. Less shots on target, this is the worst one I think. 11 in the first 4 games, it's only 4 in the last 4 games, which was a little bit of a worry. He is creating slightly more chances, but the difference is pretty negligible. So I guess you have to be realistic. He probably was never going to score 5 in 4 matches again for the rest of the season, probably. But 1 in 4 is obviously not looking too good either. So I think the big thing for me is if you've got the money to go straight to Wilson, straight to Abraham, they're in probably better sides that are going to score more goals, good form, good fixtures as well, then you probably should just do it. If you've got to take a hit, I'm not so sure about it. I think if you're someone that likes to act quickly and get the job done quick, as in, cut ties with the player, then this week's a pretty good week to do it. I don't think the Man United and Brighton games are that good for Norwich. But I do think the Bournemouth game is good enough to keep him if you're not quite sure. So that's what I'm going to do probably keep him this week, go into next week with 2 free transfers, and then if I'm still not sure about him, it's probably time to get rid, especially if he blanks versus Bournemouth. I know a lot of people, because they got him for 6.5 million, are saying, well, he's cheap, your expectations are too high. If he blanks versus Bournemouth, that's then 5 in 6. That is not acceptable for any player. I think then it would definitely be time to get rid. So Game Week 9 captaincy is shaping up to be a little bit of a weird one. I think at the start of the season, if you told me that a lot of the polls were pointing towards Abraham and Wilson, I would have probably laughed at you. But that's what's happening now in Game Week 9. A lot of people overlooking the traditional big hitters maybe this week. So let's talk about why. Aubameyang, for me, I just think if he's your only option as a big hitter, then perhaps you could go for him again. Obviously, he's done really well this season and averaged like eight attacking returns in 8 games. So by all means, he's doing very well in that front. But Sheffield United away is not the greatest fixture. I think they've been pretty good defensively. So it's not necessarily a team that I would like to captain a player against. Spurs versus Watford, again, this should be a kind of a shoe-in for captaincy almost, but the 2 standouts are probably Kane and Son. I own Son myself. The problem is he just had a lot of international break minutes. He's going to get back kind of late to training before the match this weekend, and there's Champions League to consider as well. So there's every chance he could get rested. We probably won't know that for sure before the game week kicks off. So I'll be a bit worried about putting the captaincy on him. Let's see what Pochettino says. And Kane, I just don't trust him anymore for the captaincy armband. And Spurs in general haven't looked good recently. Maybe it's a little bit of a worry over them as a team. Obviously lost 3-0 to Brighton as well. So that's kind of why I'm not considering them. Then you've got the likes of Mane and Salah playing in a big fixture against Man United away. And again, I've kind of already touched on this a few times. Man United obviously not doing well at the moment. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer under a lot of pressure. The team under a lot of pressure. But defensively, they haven't given up too many chances now. They've not played Liverpool yet, of course, and Liverpool will create chances. They will cause that defence problems. De Gea's out, but I do think Romero is a pretty good number 2. I'm more concerned about the likes of Pogba and Martial missing out because although they're not defensive players, if you've got players in the team that can actually attack and perhaps cause a bit of goal threat themselves, that's going to cause the opposition something else to think about. But if they're not in the team, I think Liverpool is going to be a pretty easy game for them. My only worry would be captain one of these players. If Liverpool kind of go 1 or 2-0 up, how many more goals are they going to go for? They've got the team to sit there and defend. And if Man United are without the likes of Pogba or Martial, they're probably not going to cause too many issues. So I don't like these kind of fixtures because they can be quite tight. And yeah, I just, Salah and Mane for me just wouldn't be a week where I'd do it in. But if you think that Man United are going to be worried without De Gea, then that's obviously a pretty big miss. Then it could be a good option to go for. Man City, obviously De Bruyne, we don't know 100% if he'll be back. If he is, would he be rushed in? Would he play a good amount of minutes? Sterling, how far out on the left would he be? Crystal Palace only conceded 1 goal at home all season. They have played Everton, Villa, Wolves and Norwich. So not awful, to be fair. Not awful fixtures, not easy ones, but not super difficult either. But only 1 goal at home all season is pretty decent. And Aguero, there's big news out just as I'm recording this that he's been involved in a car crash. Hopefully he's perfectly fine. Apparently he didn't get injured or kind of have any major problems from it, but obviously we don't have a huge amount of news from that either right now, so I can't say for sure. But I just think there's a lot I don't like about captaining Man City versus Crystal Palace this week, so I'm probably not looking there either. So does it really come down to Wilson versus Abraham? They've both got good home fixtures. Wilson versus Norwich, and Abraham's got Newcastle as well. Obviously you could look at Hudson-Odoi and Mount, but I think Abraham looks a bit like the standout right now. So looking between those two, last 4 matches, Wilson versus Abraham. So big chances, Wilson's slightly ahead, 7 versus 6. But in terms of every other metric, he's kind of down. So he's had 10 shots versus Abraham's 15, 8 shots in the box versus 13, on target 8 versus 10 for Abraham. And expected goals, Abraham's slightly higher on that as well. And then when you look at the teams that they're playing, so Newcastle versus Norwich all season, shots conceded in the box, Norwich have conceded 97, Newcastle only 78. That's still 4th over all teams. Expected goals conceded, Norwich is second on 15.35 and they conceded 21 in total, so huge after 8 games. That's nearly an average of 3 a game. Newcastle 11.96 expected goals conceded, so still quite high. And they've conceded 13 altogether. In purely away matches, it's a little bit closer. So expected goals are really close, 7.51 versus 7.41. That's expected goals conceded. And they've conceded a similar amount of shots as well. It is worth noting, however, the Newcastle at home have played, have played Norwich when they were in their prime as well, when Pukki got that hat-trick. Spurs, Liverpool and Leicester, whereas Norwich have played Liverpool, West Ham, Burnley, Palace. So maybe slightly easier fixtures for them, which is why the away stats for defending are slightly more even. But I think defensively, away from home, neither of these teams are that great this season. I think Chelsea have scored so many goals already. They're only 2 behind Liverpool. They're a great shout this week. I think the personal stats point to Abraham. The team stats probably point slightly towards Wilson. So I do think it's pretty close. I think if I had to pick one, if I could just pick one now to put into my team this week, I'd probably side with Wilson. But I don't own him and I do own Abraham and I'm super happy to captain him. So I think there's very good reasons not to captain the normal big hitters this week. I don't think that Sterling, Aguero and De Bruyne, if he's back, Salah and Mane are bad options this week. I just think if you're going to go outside the box, so to speak, then this could be the week to do it. So let me know below who your captaincy is for this week. So just going to go through a few other bits that people ask me. So triple up on Leicester, is that a good option? Now, I think whenever you want to triple up on any team, you first of all got to ask if each individual player is worth it. So a lot of people are probably looking at one defender, probably Soyuncu just because of price, Maddison and Vardy, and each individual player is obviously good. Are there enough goals to go around to own Maddison and Vardy? Well, they're not creating necessarily a huge amount of chances. We know that Vardy is pretty clinical, and they have scored, I think, the 4th highest amount of goals this season so far out of the whole league. So doing pretty well in that regard. So I think Maddison for his price versus other midfielders is one of the better options. And Vardy for his price is probably one of the best options as well. The only thing with Vardy is when you drop down a bit to the likes of Pukki, Wilson, Abraham, then maybe they can offer just as much for a cheaper price, which is what put me off him. But if you think that their fixtures are good and you think they're going to score enough goals, I have no problems at all anytime anyone thinks about tripling up on a team. Kevin De Bruyne and non-owners, what should you do this week? Should you just ride it out? Should you get him straight back in? I think Crystal Palace away, like I've already said in captaincy, have not conceded a huge amount of goals at home so far. It is a little bit of a bogey team for Man City, although I don't know how much that really matters going forward, of course. Is De Bruyne going to play a huge amount of minutes, etc.? I think there's enough there that if you've taken him out, you ride it out for one game week and then you look to maybe get him in the next week. If you can do it for free, great. If it's for a hit, I'm not so sure. Unless Pep comes out and says he's fully fit, he's going to play 90 minutes, which he's obviously not going to do. I'll be a little bit... I think you can just use that as an excuse not to bring him in this week and then look to do it next week, basically. At least that's my plan. Hudson-Odoi, should you get him in? I mean, if you want to get him in, get him in. 5.9 million, great price. Much cheaper than Mount. Really good confidence playing for the England under 21 teams during midweek. 2 assists, I think, so far for Chelsea already for very limited minutes. So who knows what he can do when he gets a run in the side, which he should do now. So if you want to get him in, looks like a good differential. Potentially you could even triple up him, Mount and Abraham because they're such good prices if you think they're going to score enough goals, of which they've only scored 2 less than Liverpool this year so far, which is pretty decent. Then investing in Arsenal fullbacks is too early. Let's wait and see when they actually play in the league. Whether they keep their place consistently. You'd hope that when Tierney and Bellerin are back, they'll pick those two, play them most weeks, and then pick 2 centre-backs to play week in, week out and keep the team solid like that. But we know what Emery's like. He does rotate things quite a bit. So we'll have to wait and see. When they're fully back, fully fit, let's see how many minutes they get in a row, and then maybe we can look at getting them. But it's too early right now when they haven't played that many minutes this season, and we don't know how they're going to gel together. Arsenal have had 2 clean sheets, which isn't bad considering the top teams have only got 3. But defensively, we'll have to see if they can keep that, keep a bit more consistency going forward. So that's it for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to leave a like on the video. Much appreciated as always. If you've got anything to say on the kind of topics and questions that I covered, any different opinions, etc., always love to hear them. Leave a comment below, and if you're new around here, subscribe, hit that bell, when all the videos are going live. There will be a live stream Thursday 9 o'clock, so if you want to check that out, make sure you tune in then. And lastly, if you want to try out the free football app, OneFootball, the link is in the description below. Otherwise, I will leave it there and catch you next time. Cheers all.